Okay guys, hope this video finds you doing well. We're going to do a quick overview of Project 2. We'll talk a little bit about information hierarchy, and I'll show you a couple examples for tasks 1 and 2 so you're clear on kind of how to proceed. I'll do another video that talks about setting up your file in InDesign. Some of you might do this in Illustrator. I would recommend InDesign, and I'll kind of walk you through the again, setting up your file, maybe working with a grid. I'm going to assign you some reading as well from your Type Primer textbook. Okay, so stay tuned for that as well. I'll post that as a discussion. So please make sure you're consistently checking your discussions as well. Okay, so today I posted a discussion about fonts for Project 2, and so there's some information there. And if you're on a Mac, and you should have Helvetica automatically. I included a couple different weights for you. If you do have Helvetica already, this would be a nice way to provide more contrast in weights, because Helvetica, between say like a regular weight and a bold weight, it's not that huge. So using a light and a bold would be a great thing, or a regular and a black. When you get into using two different weights, and we'll talk more about that. And there are a couple videos on installing fonts on your computers as well. Okay, so back to the assignments here. You're going to see in Project 2, I haven't published these other tasks yet, but essentially what we're going to do is we're going to have our main project overview, and that's where you'll submit your final project. These Project 2 task reviews are going to be, since we can't get together and meet in class, usually these would be like process critiques. What you're going to be doing is actually submitting them into Canvas for my review, and then I'll get back to you, with feedback, and it'll be a little bit slower, a little more tedious this way, but it's just kind of how we're going to have to do it right now because of the fact that we're doing it online. So, so keep a lookout. Every time a new task is due, I'll publish these, and there's no content in them. As you'll see, there's no, it's just for you to go in and submit your process work for each task, okay? And that's all going to be based on, in the overview, as hopefully you've already seen it by now. You're going to see that your schedule, your milestones and due dates are all here. Okay, so today you're looking at the intro. By Friday on the 10th, you're going to be submitting your task 1 and 2 comps for review, okay? And then you're just going to follow this schedule to get all your work handed in. And if you're able to do that, that'll keep us on track. You'll stay ahead of the game. You'll be able to refine, because you're going to be submitting and then refining based on feedback. And the whole idea is to submit and refine until you get to around the 27th, where you take all your first 6 tasks and you got them refined to where they're finally ready to be turned in. And then you're going to do your 7th task, and then on May 1st, you're going to have 1 through 7 finals dialed in, refined, and ready to go, submitted into this main information hierarchy Project 2 assignment, and that'll be your final grade. So the final grade is 100 points on the project for the 7 finals, and then each of these process steps is worth 5 points, so those will tally up as well to a total of about 35 extra points. So make sure you don't miss those, okay? So that's important. Let's talk a little bit about the assignment. So you're going to produce a series of informational pages using pre-existing content, okay? By that I mean this content here. This is the content you're going to use. This is going to be used in all of your tasks, okay? And the first thing you're going to do is copy and paste this. The spelling should be fine, but you're going to always want to make sure that you double check. There's going to be no formatting has been done, so there's going to be you're going to want to detail things out, and we'll talk more about that in another video, okay? But you're essentially going to take this information and set it up in 8x8 pages, okay? And you're going to use Helvetica as your typeface. Now, if you're on a Mac, like I said, you have Helvetica. It should be installed. If you're on a PC, you likely have Arial. That's basically the PC copy of Helvetica, drawn differently, maybe not as well, but it will suffice for our purposes here, okay? So if you're on a PC and you don't have Helvetica but you have Arial, that will be fine. If you don't have either one, let me know and we'll figure something out for you, okay? So you start with these early tasks you have very limited parameters. So for example, in task 1, you're only allowed to use one font point, one point size and one weight. So For example, if I'm using Helvetica and I'm laying it out on my 8x8 page, I can use, let's say I want to use 8.5 point Helvetica, okay, or 9 point Helvetica. I can, all of my font, all my type has to be that size. And let's say I pick the regular weight, it's all got to be just regular weight. So I can't add different weights, a bold and a regular, and I can't have two different sizes and all of that. As you move into task 2, you're going to see you still only get to use one size, so it would still be, say, 9 point Helvetica. But now you can use two weights, so you might use a light Helvetica and a bold Helvetica, or an italic and a bold, or something like that. Okay, so again, by weights, we're talking about regular, medium, bold, italic, condensed, etc. Right? And then as you'll see, as you move through the tasks, the parameters open up a little bit. New things are introduced. And and then we get into things like experimental. This won't make a lot of sense to you now, but we'll talk about that as I show you examples through when each task is introduced, okay? So again, this is the content you're going to be using, and you're essentially working with it in a way that, number one, makes it clear. So you're laying it out in a way where the hierarchy is clear. You want a first read, a second read, maybe a third read, etc. And but also you want to make it compelling. So there's going to be, as we proceed through these tasks, the hierarchy is important, but you're going to have a little more creative license to push things. And sometimes hierarchy also can mean making something visually really compelling in an environment that has a lot of visual stimulus. So let's say you're looking through a magazine, or you see a poster on a wall, or a flyer, or something like that. There's a lot of visual information around you. Sometimes hierarchy is also could mean something that catches your attention. Okay, so you have a lot of while these constraints seem tight, you're only limited by your own imagination. Okay, and your own sense of what's possible. Okay, and that'll make more sense as we go. So, process here. The first thing you're going to do is, what is this? Okay, what is Magma Manchester? What is this little blurb? Okay, this is for you to figure out. Okay, research is probably the first order of business I would do. I would figure out what Magma Manchester even is. Okay, and then I got to figure out. Now, I'm not telling you that your layouts are specifically. They're not a flyer. They're not a poster. I'm not giving you that exact context. Maybe they're an informational flyer or a little mini poster that would be found in a shopping bag when you shop at this place. So I've just given you the idea that yes, it's a store of some sort. Okay, maybe it's something that's found in an art publication, or something that's tipped into an interesting magazine or something. Maybe it's something that could be found just online. Okay, so you're going to essentially get familiar with the process. Make sure you have access to Helvetica with several weights, or again, Arial, if that's what you have, is fine. Sketch your layout roughs, okay? So you don't want to jump, again, right to the computer. You want to figure out, just really simply, little thumbnails. You can use lines for type, and start to sketch out where you want to place things. If it's helpful to see some past student sketches, I can get some of those for you. And then for each task, I want you to do, minimum 3 up to 5 comps. So you're going to do 3 to 5 different variations of your layouts, okay, of an 8x8 page for each task. And then you're going to submit those comps as a PDF. And I'll do a video again, like I said, when I show you the video for setting up InDesign, I'll also show you how to export for PDF and all that if you don't know. And then the final files for each task will be, you have 7 finals at the end of the day, okay? And so that's an overview there. So that's your content. You're using the same content for all of these tasks, okay? So when we're talking about information hierarchy, let's look at some examples here. It can take the shape, it can take many different forms, okay? Here's a packaging situation where you have hierarchy, but it's really, you have 2 different sizes, but only slightly. You see the product name here, the brand. And you see that's slightly larger than this information here, but only very slightly. This is the way that they're using hierarchy here is by position and space. So we tend to read left to right, top to bottom. So this is all a very minimalist, flush left modern layout. And so hierarchy is slightly different size is what they're doing, but also placing it in terms of the upper left. We tend to read top down, so we know that this is the brand. This is what the product is, and these are some sort of key elements featured in the product, okay? That's on the outside package. When you open up the product and pull it out, you see it's even more minimal. So, this becomes almost its own sense of hierarchy. When you have this thing sitting in your shower, for example, and you have several other bottles of shampoos and whatever, this thing's going to stand out just based on, the color and how sleek it looks and how minimal it looks. So that's a very, straightforward, very basic use of hierarchy, but effective. Another product here, you can see essentially what they're using here is size, okay? Because this is all the same typeface. And they might even be the same weights. This might be slightly heavier, but you can see, it's not that. There's not a big contrast in the weight between these typefaces. Sometimes when you scale up a typeface, it'll look heavier, but this is all about size. Okay, they're doing top to bottom as well, but they know when I read this package, I want to know that this is organic soap consisting of this scent. Okay, this is the brand. You can say they've applied that brand consistently, but they want you to see when the products are laid out that this is what the product is and this is what it's what the feature is, okay? So these are the different scents in this case for these different soaps, okay? But, clear top to bottom, really minimal. This is, you'll see in task 3, you're going to use lines or rules as one of your elements, and this is a good example of that, using lines to divide up information in a way that, again, creates a sense of hierarchy and organization and makes it easier on the viewer, okay? Here's a business card. Really, minimal, again, modern design. And here you're essentially using size and you're using weights for difference, okay? So when you get into using, different sizes and different weights for your tasks, this is an example of a really minimalist business card for a graphic designer that uses Helvetica at a, actually this is not Helvetica, this is a different typeface. This is Universe, but uses it at a, very minimal context, but size and weight are the main elements for hierarchy here. Okay, we've seen this before. This is all about scale and weight. Okay, these large numbers take the center stage here, and then the supportive information, is just supportive information. You have, because this is placed at the top and divided up by these rules here, you can see that, okay, this is sort of the label of what's happening here, and these are sort of some feature components that they're then using support information to explain, okay? More, I mean, these are different versions of a very similar, these are real projects here, but these are not unlike what you're working with for this project, okay? You can see here that they would use any size, any weight. Let's say your task, you can use any size, any weight using lines and rules. By lines and rules, I just mean these kind of things. You can use them for, in this case, they're emphasizing or solidifying a headline here. They might be using it here for dividing up space, like we talked about. And scale is a big difference here. The scale is the main hierarchical element that's in play here. Okay. All right. Another clean example. Size being used. Here's a very, again, a wayfinding situation for a subway system, and again, it's all the same typeface, throughout this whole thing, but they're using size and weight to create a sense of hierarchy. Okay, in addition to placement. If it was all the same size and all the same weight, it would be much harder to understand. Okay, so some more of the same. Looking at a business card like this, again, you see top to bottom, heavier weight, larger size, and that's the main element there. University of the Arts of London, the sort of the name of the entity, the institution, the person's name, and a little bit bolder weight there, and then all this stuff can be the same weight because it's secondary to the the person whose card it is and where it's from. Okay, just some more of the same from that identity. Okay, so these are just some more examples of hierarchy in place. And also I'm showing you some elements of Helvetica here. Now you're going to get into some abilities to work with experimental tasks and pushing things. These are some examples. These aren't highly experimental, and I'll show you more examples as we proceed through the project, but you have some room again to play with the type in a way that creates something compelling. Okay, so information hierarchy is good, but it's also got to be interestingly done to make the reader want to engage with it. Okay, all interesting uses of Helvetica in different contexts. Okay, sorry, these are looking a little bitmapped here because I've got them blown up pretty heavily for our purposes. But this is all Helvetica used. This is an agency called Experimental Jet Set. You might be interested in checking them out. They're in Holland, and they pretty much only use Helvetica throughout all of their work. And you can see it establishes a clear sort of aesthetic, this very modern kind of sleek look. Okay, packaging is, like we looked at earlier, another example of hierarchy in place. This is similar to your assignment. It's just a different context. It's basically taking some main information, some secondary information, and some tertiary or third level information, and knowing how to work with them in size and weight to create emphasis in the information, so you know where to go first as the reader, where to go second, where to go third, etc. Okay. This is something you guys just worked on in your last project, but here it's essentially all the same weight. You're just dealing with different sizes. And it's obviously in terms of how it's organized top to bottom, it's numbered. So there's clarity there, even when you use all caps, even when you use all the same size, even when you use all the same weight, you have a clear sense of hierarchy just based on placement, okay, and organization, okay. So a very minimalist approach, but works because of, it's done in a highly considered way, okay. Helvetica at a large size looks really good. Okay, one of the things I want to mention, guys, is when you use Helvetica, don't use it at 12 points and 13 points and 14 points. Helvetica looks good smaller because it's drawn fairly large. It looks really good at like 8.5, 8.25. Don't forget those quarter sizes and half sizes. Those are sometimes the magical sizes. So even with your line spacing, let's say you set your type at 8.5 points tall or large size, and your line spacing, maybe that's, instead of just 11 or 12, maybe it's 11.5, maybe it's 11.75, okay, 11.75. So make sure you think about those little spacing details. They make a difference. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to see each other's work printed, and that's the whole point of this thing, is seeing it all in print. So we're going to have to make do. It's going to be less obviously chunky and funky and weird when it's on screen. When you print your work, which I still highly recommend you do if you can, you'll notice that anything set in Helvetica around 11 point, 10 point, 13 point, it just looks bad, okay? When you start to get large again, like these sizes here, when you get into, especially with all caps, into 18, 20, 30, 40, etc., it starts to look really good again, and big Helvetica looks amazing. Okay, so just make sure that you're aware of the size that you're using. I mean, here's big Helvetica, it looks beautiful, okay? And this is a nice example of, simple hierarchy in play, size and weight being the key components here, using lines and rules to divide up the titles and then the subsection here, okay? So you have the main title, the subhead, and a little blurb that explains what this is about, okay? All right, again, more Helvetica, big Helvetica, looks incredible, okay? All right. This is a great experimental example of Helvetica in use, okay? So, something to think about. Another great experimental example of Helvetica in use. And this is going to relate more to task 6, when you move down deeper into the assignment, okay? And the experimental means whatever you want it to mean, so you're gonna do what you feel works best, okay? Let me show you examples. I typically don't show examples until after you guys submit exercises 1 and 2, but given our situation, I figure it's best to show you some examples now. And these aren't meant to be considered, I think these are effective. And something to consider. So when you think of one size, one weight, it's like, well, what can you do with one size of Helvetica and one weight? It's all the same. Well, it depends on how you lay it out here, and some of these are going to be, just total visual exploration, and some of them will be more, neutral and more organized, and some of them are just going to be more engaging. So since you're doing 3 to 5 examples of each, I suggest trying both for each task. Do some that are a little more clean and organized, and do some that maybe you push things a little bit. All right. So here's one size, one weight of Helvetica. Essentially, they're breaking up the information into blocks, and there's your hierarchy, left to right, top to bottom. Wow, this is for Magma Covent Garden. That's where it is. This is an earlier version, so it doesn't say Magma Manchester. Don't worry about that. It's the same basic idea. And so there's one example set in this lower quarter quadrant. This is broken up in a grid and into 4 sections. And I'll show you that in another video. Okay. Another example, okay, one size, one weight. Now you could argue, like, hierarchically, there's not a ton happening here. You know, it's basically top to bottom, left to right, okay? But this is, again, done in a way where you know, you're taking this element and overlapping it, creating different values, different shades of, you know, gray and, you know, really dark and black. But you know, it's just done through overlap and repetition, okay? And creates an engaging layout that is hierarchy in its own way, okay? Same block, just experimented with in different ways, trying to create a sense of movement here. Okay. One that's a little more you know, standard looking and also works really well. So this is one, you know, if you see the 2 different approaches there, it's nice to have that range in your exploration, something that's a little pushed, like I said, and something that's maybe a little more cleanly organized and straightforward. You can reorganize that list, okay? So the list that's given to you in the content can be reorganized in a way that feels good. If you take it the way it is listed, you know, you want to look at how your rag is on this right side, how this rag is being shaped, okay? So you reorganize this list in a way that feels right, okay? Here's another one. Nice use of one size and one weight, but using all caps here for this main. So they've taken that list and they've taken art from that list, which is in the list, and they've set that as sort of a you know, a header for that list, and then they give you different examples of that, and then the little blurb there, the information, and then the title of the company. Okay, interesting movement. This one's almost more poetically done. Okay, breaking up the information in an interesting way. Okay. So another example here, using different, you can rotate your type. These are different, you know, these are all 45-degree rotations. And you can see the example. Here's one example of it in one size, one weight. That's what one size, 2 weights would look like. Okay, same exact layout. But you can see just the adding of that bolder weight does a lot to create more emphasis. So you know that it's art, Magma Covent Garden, a powerful source. And then you could read the other information. Okay. Another example. So here's one that's interesting because we talked about, you've read in your textbook, there's a section in there that says English is not Chinese, and we're generally not into stacking, you know, vertically stacking type, because you can see this looks pretty funky, you know. But at the same time, the way they did this, playing off the title of the company here, and then doing this almost matrix-like format, they've broken a rule, but they've done it in a way that works pretty well, you know. And they've made this sort of all caps, slightly tight line spacing. It's intentionally done. There's a cheekiness happening here that I think is kind of interesting. You could refine some of the things here, but it's an interesting take and some rule breaking that might actually work. Okay. Another example of one size, 2 weights. Okay, this looks like a regular and a bold here, so you can see not a ton of contrast happening. If you have the lightweight and then combine that with the bold, it would be better. But this is a good example. One size weight, one size type and 2 weights of type. Okay, this is getting into task 3, so we'll stop there for now. Okay, I'll stop this video here. It's long enough, and we'll get into another video for setup. So stay tuned for that. Let me know if you have any questions, guys. Thanks.